All right, this is Sean, and today I'm gonna teach y'all a little bit about the basics of pool. Pool is an interesting game slash sport. Kind of would work for both. Interesting because most people's exposure and experience around a pool table and playing pool is more purely just to pass time, enjoy hanging out with people, and have a good time, and not so much to be serious about it or competitive about it. When I say serious, I don't mean not enjoying it. I mean serious as in understanding the dynamics of how to get good at it and to build um, a skill set around playing pool very well. You know, starting from the roots of how to build a foundation, from starting with having a good base that you're going to shoot off of, that you're going to use your cue stick on, setting up an appropriate base that is very stable and stout, and building from that foundation so that now you can put the stick on it and figure out how to hold the stick in such a way that when you stroke the cue stick on this base that you create that is very solid, now you have a stroke that is consistent, and that consistency will allow you to make minor adjustments and be able to count on the results, because every time that you take your shot, you do so in a way of following through with the same exact stroke every time. If you can't count on the consistency of starting with the foundational base that you're going to be resting this cue stick on, that you're going to shoot from, and also the way that you're holding the cue stick in the back. Let me get over here so you can see. So that when I have a solid base and I'm stroking with my right hand, if I'm right-handed, now if you're left-handed, it'd just be the opposite. But the hand that's holding onto the back of the cue stick now, you realize I'm not holding on with a solid grip like this, right? Which doesn't allow for you to stroke straight. This allows you to be able to move your wrists and actually make a straight stroke to where the cue stick stays at the same kind of angle along the table, and so you hit right through the ball, right? So once you figure out how to set up a base, now everybody has a different way of setting up a base. Sometimes they set it up to where a finger goes around the cue stick. So you'll see people sometimes have a base like this. I don't like this base. The reason I don't like it, for me personally, is just because there's a certain size hole that my index finger wrapping around the stick makes, and as the stick slides across the base, the stick gets thicker, and so it might make contact with the hole that I've set up with my index finger around, and it might make more contact and friction than I want. I particularly like more of a V base, which is a V that now the cue stick slides on top of. Now as you come over against banks or from different angles, the ball's over here next to the bank, I can now set up my bridge or my base along the rail, and now it's different. I still make a V, right? Still make a V, and now I'm still hitting, I'm still sliding across a solid base. So it will form differently based on where along the cushion I am, or if I'm out in the open. If I have to shoot over another ball, say there's another ball in the way, now maybe I have to pick my base up taller, and still I'm shooting on a V. I'm resting my cue stick on a V, right? And my hand is still very solid. It's not wonky and wobbly, so that when I've got my pinky finger over here is over here. So no matter what, you have to start with a very solid base and figure out how you're gonna rest the cue stick on top of it and stroke your cue in a way that's consistent enough that you can count on that stroke every time and make slight alterations of how you're gonna aim, which then your eye becomes seeing down the table and figuring out the angle that you're gonna shoot. This is a game and a sport of angles. When I have a solid, consistent stroke, now I can adjust my angle, and I can use my eye to see the shots and to see the angles on the table, and I can count on the result when I follow through with my cue stick. And then if I want to use and incorporate English into my stroke, this is where I'm gonna make contact with the cue ball. I'll show you this way so you can see it. If I'm gonna shoot straight, in the middle, there's no English. But if I raise my cue stick to where I'm hitting on top of the cue ball, there will be an English that will make the cue ball follow. Once it hits the ball, it will follow down the table. So after it makes contact and this ball goes in another direction, now the cue ball has a tendency to follow more. That's the kind, because you're putting spin or English on the ball. If I'm going to use lower English down at the bottom, instead of center now and instead of up top, I'm going to hit on the bottom. If I stroke through the cue and I follow through, you always want to follow through. Once I follow through with a stroke, then I'm going to create a rotating English or rotation on the ball that retreats back after it makes contact with another ball. So once I make contact with this 4 ball, now after making contact, I have the ability to bring the cue ball back. This is English. So once you have a solid base set up, then you can always count on the same stroke every time. Now I can make alterations as to the angle that I see, and I can make alterations to where on the cue ball I'm going to hit with English, and I can create a different environment after I make contact with the ball as to what I want to do with the cue ball in order to set up my next shot. So much of this game is about looking 2 or 3 shots ahead at where you want to end up. Once you can count on the stroke and you hit straight through a normal shot, you know what's going to happen with that cue ball. And if I hit a normal shot with the right angle to make my shot, it could be that now once I make contact at the perfect angle with no English, that now the cue ball is going to go over and fall into a pocket, which would mean a scratch and I'm not able to continue. So now I can use English once I make and I hit the right angle to do something different with the cue ball to avoid scratching or to go around balls that I don't want to make contact with in order to set up my next shot or to avoid scratching. So English comes into play when hitting directly through the center of the cue ball. When you hit the appropriate angle, it's going to take the path of the cue ball in a way that's not going to be beneficial or what you don't want to do. So you use the English in order to set up your next shot. And so when you get really good at pool, you're starting to think 2, 3, sometimes 4 shots ahead of where you're at and planning accordingly to get there. So that's a little 101 on how to get started with playing pool and to understand what you're doing as opposed to just hitting balls around trying to make the balls. There's more of a consciousness and detail that you can accomplish by practicing a good solid base and then starting to learn English. And that's it. And then practicing enough to where you get the angles down, you're able to see how to hit a ball to where you're able to make shots.